Well, hello and welcome to the lecture for week 4 of ORGL 5005, um, where we'll be looking at part 2 of our exploration of leading others. This lecture talks about how we are perceived as leaders by all the people we work with and what we can learn from those perceptions. This week we're going to take a deep dive into the world of 360 assessments. The Center for Creative Leadership, based in Greensboro, North Carolina, with offices around the country and the world, is a research think tank at the leading edge of psychometric data analysis and interpretation. The center specializes in the behavioral competencies of leaders and managers, from first-line supervisors to senior executives. And they do this throughout the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. The center has a variety of validated 360 assessment instruments that their consultants and coaches use to assess and provide developmental feedback to their clients. This lecture will introduce you to the concepts, principles, and application of 360 assessment instruments to the development of team and organizational leaders. So first off, what is a 360-degree assessment? Well, it is a very formal and rigorous process where anonymous input is sought from people who work for and with an individual. The individual being assessed is called the participant. The persons for whom the input is sought are called raters. Raters include the participant's direct reports, peer colleagues, customers, if any, immediate supervisor, and sometimes even a higher level manager or others who have knowledge of the participant's professional work. Because there are multiple raters in the direct report, peer, and customer categories, their feedback is in effect anonymous because the participant cannot accurately link the responses to any single rater. This anonymity protects the raters, and the results are much more accurate, and the feedback is much more useful. Not surprisingly, there are some myths about 360. Whenever I consult on 360, I always stress that 360 assessments are not valid or useful for performance management. The problem with using 360 for performance management is the raters, particularly the direct reports and peers, may see the assessment as an opportunity either curry favor with the participant or to get even with that participant. The inevitable result is highly polarized data that is not really valid for any purpose. In fact, the only valid and useful application for 360 is the professional development of the participant. Okay, so why is all this important? Why are we bothering? Well, think back to our discussion of Arthur Friedman's Pathways and Crossroads model. Recall that as we move along the path of organizational leadership to new competencies, we need to assure our success and preparation for advancement. 360 assessments, when they are well aligned with the organizational strategy and are properly administered, gives the participant a very clear understanding of exactly where they need to focus their personal development efforts. One of the challenges to 360 is the feeling of exposure, of vulnerability on the part of the participant. I confess that it is something I face every time I receive feedback. The critical success factor is in the feedback coaching. Unlike our very frank fortune teller here, a well-trained feedback coach guides the participant through all the data and the narrative comments to help them come to their own conclusion. Our fortune teller may be correct in her assessment, but when the participant comes to their own conclusions, the results are much more meaningful, much more impactful, and are more likely to be sustained. Looking at 360 in another way, they're conceptually well aligned with the objectives of this course: leading self, lead others, lead organizations. The next 3 slides will take you through a look at the associated behavioral competencies. For self-leadership, we tend to look at courage. This is all about making hard decisions as well as standing up for what is right despite opposition. Another is executive image, sometimes called executive presence. Maybe gravitas was a term once used for this. It has to do with the self-confidence, poise, communication skills, grace under pressure, that sort of thing. Learning from experience. This has to do with understanding and building on success, as well as admitting to and learning from failure. Credibility. This is not just about honesty and technical competence. It also gets into the reliability and maintaining confidences. Okay, move on. Leading others. In this dimension, we tend to look at the kinds of things, 6 things or so listed here. Different organizations value different things when it comes to leading others. But in general, the ability to relate effectively to the people with whom we work is the key to success. When leading a business, the broadest perspective and accompanying leadership skills like these are needed. Remember, at this point, the leaders are responsible for the overall success of the enterprise. Those foundational leadership skills of leading self and leading others are the building blocks for effectively and credibly acquiring the skills needed at the highest levels in the organization. We have all seen or experienced failed leadership. 2 significant factors and 1 very important point should be made here. First, it is entirely possible to overuse a strength. If we rely upon 1 or a limited number of skills, we do not develop our other skills. In fact, we may not even recognize that the other skills are even needed. Second, when that happens, it is inevitable that a leadership challenge will emerge that we are not prepared to deal with. The result is failure in some form or another. The point of this is that the pervasive value of feedback is that the perceptions of feedback represent. Right or wrong, it is how others make their decisions about you. Can you think of a situation where problems arise from that kind of disconnect? Well, that's it for this lecture. See you the next slide for a couple of final notes. Once again, just a final reminder, do not forget those deadlines on Wednesday and Sunday. Work hard, learn a lot.